What happens when when your body makes it difficult to speak, but you still have plenty to say? For Rob Stone, eye gaze technology is more than equipment. It has to make it. It's how to make his own voice heard. Um, today, Geneva Robert Stone um, and Angela, his direct support professional who helps him with his eye gaze, returned to discuss Robert's rare condition, DYTPRKRA. Um, the the realities of caregiving and why supporting someone should always include listening to them. Welcome to Rare Connection. I'm your host, Joanna. Rob. Welcome to Rare Connection. Before we talk about your diagnosis or any technology you use, what would you like people to know about you?
I am an artist and advocate with a rare disease. I enjoy going on dates with my girlfriend Caroline and hanging out with my other friends, playing Challenger Little League Baseball, watching movies like Star Wars, drinking whiskey, and causing trouble.
Dr. Roger, see, we heard about you do during the conversation with Geneva, but this is the first time our audience has gotten to meet you. Could you introduce yourself and tell us a little about your role in Rob's life?
Um, yeah, so I'm, of course, Rob's dad, um, which, somebody with a rare, son with a rare disease that, becomes much more all-encompassing, encompassing occupation than just being a regular dad. In my spare time, I work in politics, and have to identify myself, of course, as the other or not Trump, Roger Stone.
Geneva. So let's go back to the beginning. What were the first signs when something was different?
Well, the first signs were very sudden. It has been classified as a sudden onset genetic disorder, and man, was it sudden. Uh, Robert had over the first year of his life, especially during the second 6 months of his life, had episodes where he appeared, say, clumsy, that seemed a little odd, but they were clumsy in a way that didn't last. So you would think, oh, he just lost his balance, this, that, or the other thing happened. And then he would just be perfectly fine and moving, the way typical people move. And when everything came to a head, that was the day I picked him up from his babysitter, brought him home. The babysitter had been concerned. Robert had seemed tired. She said his eyelids were droopy all the time. I later learned there's a medical term for that neurologic condition called ptosis. And he'd had trouble doing things and had trouble. He wasn't quite walking independently yet, but he could hold a single finger and walk and things. And he'd just been having difficulty with balance and things like that. And we had just been on a quick and very fulsome trip to Canada to visit my husband's family. And it had been, really fast and tiring. And so I just thought, oh, Robert's tired, So got him home, set him on the living room rug with some toys, um, walked into the kitchen to get a couple things done, heard this thud, went, racing back into the living room to see what had happened. And Rob was just kind of lying sideways, um, fallen over, stunned, not responding to my voice. And it was a strange kind of falling over. It wasn't a falling over like, collapsed on the rug with, everything limp. It was like, some kind of statue that you topple over and the limbs all, and arms and legs and everything just kind of stay in the same position, like you're frozen. And so obviously I was really scared and alarmed. And I was like, racing over to him, calling his name. And then all of a sudden, just boom, like snapping your fingers, um, he was just back to normal. And he was sitting up and he was fine. And, I often use an analogy that probably most people wouldn't understand at this point because we don't remember VHS tapes. But I guess we still have that with digital films. I mean, you can pause a film, right? And everything is frozen in place. And then you can hit play and all of a sudden the film starts again. And that was exactly the way that it was. Like someone had hit pause and everything had frozen, and then someone hit play and everything resumed.
Hmm.
And so Robert seemed, tired at that point, and it was getting to be his bedtime. He was little. He was, just over the age of 1. And so I decided, I'd rock him to sleep and get him down to bed and got him in his pajamas, and he was sleeping in his crib, and Roger came home from work, and I was, really unsettled, and described what had happened. And we were just kind of thinking about, well, what would cause him to lose his balance? Because that was the only lens we could see it through at that point in time, even if it was weird, right? And Roger thought, well, maybe he has an ear infection, I mean, call the practice in the morning. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll do that. So, he slept through the night just fine, got up in the morning, roaming around, eating his breakfast, then he was crawling around the living room. And then I didn't even have a chance to call the clinic yet because it was like a 45-minute drive. So I got in the shower, Robert's playing with some toys in the bathroom, and all of a sudden he just froze holding a toy. And he was far away. He couldn't hear me, and I was yelling his name. And the same thing happened. I'm yelling and yelling, panicking, trying to like scramble out of the tub. And all of a sudden, it's like this invisible hand hits play. And then Robert's like, oh, I got a toy in my hand. And he drops in the bucket and he starts crawling around. And so by now, it's almost like I'm in some kind of horror movie where all these weird things are happening. It's terrifying because it's real. And I called the practice and tried to describe to them what was going on. I didn't think of calling an ambulance for reasons I don't fully understand to this day. And their response was, bring him right in. So I did. And I brought him down to the pediatric clinic at Georgetown. And we got triaged and got back to a room right away. And then the doctors were in and out. And Robert was kind of going in and out of this state of being kind of like here and hip and with us. And then sleepy and tired and droopy and, not with us. And people did tests. And we were there all day because I took him down in the morning and we didn't go home until 6 or 7 o'clock at night. And all of these tests came back negative, normal, negative, normal. We even went down for a CT scan. And Roger at some point joined us. And then later, a few months later, we found out that the reason the doctors decided to just have us go home, because they said, why don't you go home? We're going to make a decision about whether to hospitalize him, and we'll let you know in the morning. And of course, they called us and said, we're going to hospitalize him. But the reason that they did that was because this was 1998, so before genome sequencing and genetic testing was really robust. They thought he had one of those genetic childhood illnesses like Leigh syndrome or Tay-Sachs, where the child would only have a few months or a couple of years to live. And so they wanted us to have one last night of feeling like normal as a family, as if somehow we could feel normal under those circumstances. Um, and then he was in the hospital for 2 weeks, and they did more tests, and they were all negative and normal. And yet there clearly was something dramatically amiss. And, lots and lots of different health problems, struggles, different possible hypothetical diagnoses, many different neurologists, 14 years. And then we got to whole genome sequencing. And we were lucky to get on board very early on in the early days of it being available clinically, after the Human Genome Project had concluded its work sometime around, I don't know, 08, 2010, something like that. And we were connected with a nonprofit called Rare Genomics that still exists to this day, whose purpose was to connect the families of children who had been long undiagnosed with labs that would cut their prices for sequencing, and with neurologists or geneticists who would help guide the family through the sequencing process. And we decided to do whole exome sequencing with Robert. The exome, as I understand it, I think I'm still right, is roughly 10% of human DNA, but it includes all the protein encoding genes, so obviously the place to start. And we did that because the databases at NIH were at that point so new that, sure, there were still people inputting things from the introns and the other parts, the regulatory genes and everything, that were different or suspicious or seemed to cause problems. But our mentor and our guides told us, look, you're going to get back 10,000 different variants, and we're going to have to sort through them and figure out which ones of them, might be causing the problem, because everybody's got at least 10,000 different genetic variants, and most of them aren't disease causing. And there's just not enough data on anything but the exomes. So we were told that we had a roughly 30% chance of finding any kind of diagnoses, given the information that was available and logged into the databases at NIH and worldwide. And we lucked out because we found defects on each allele of the gene PRKRA, which is one of the genes that helps to control movement. And he inherited one from me, which is in the medical literature and is common to all cases of what was at first called DYT16. And then the variant that he inherited from my husband is what's called de novo, meaning it's never been seen before. It's in a different position on the gene PRKRA. And it probably, the hypothesis is by the geneticists that it probably happened when my husband was producing gametes, just during this narrow 90-day window period. Mm. And so the geneticist that guided us through the process, she still practices at Johns Hopkins. Her name is Dr. Ada Hamish. And Robert was actually her first sequencing case, so she remembers him very well. And she refers to it to this day as a 1 in 3 billion chance happening.
So what were Rob's earliest symptoms?
Like I said, before the major breakdown, there were these little minor instances of clumsiness. He might seem to be holding something, and then suddenly his arm would droop and he would drop it. He might be standing, and cruising is when toddlers hold on to something like a coffee table or the edge of a bed and then take steps. He might do that, and he might fall over or fall down. Little things like that. And of course, toddlers, kids that are learning to walk and do all that kind of stuff, well, sometimes they lose their grip on things. Sometimes they fall down. And the dystonia that was presenting was at that point presenting in this like super concentrated way. So it was literally just a blip. And it would seem strange to you when you saw it, but it didn't persist. He just snapped back to normal. So you would kind of shake your head like, what did I just see? Oh, but now he's fine, right? So it was that kind of thing. And then at a certain point, like most genetic diseases, the body reaches a point where whatever malformed protein is being produced reaches toxic levels in the body tissues. And that's when the disease presents itself, full force in a way that is inescapable.
So what conditions? Oh, okay, so you mentioned Tay-Sachs, and there were
Mm-hmm.
other conditions. So, was he misdiagnosed with those, or were they just conditions that were ruled out?
Initially, those were conditions that were ruled out. Lee's syndrome, at the time that Robert, in 1998, there was a panel test for 5 different defects I'd identified that caused Lee's syndrome, and those were all just ruled out. Tay-Sachs was tested for and ruled out. There were innumerable other diseases I can't even remember that were ruled out. We had a working hypothesis at one point with a geneticist at Hopkins, who is awesome and is still awesome, who was looking at uh, unusual cases of acute disseminated encephalomyelitis, which is a brain inflammation that can be caused by viruses that causes demyelination in the brain and causes a specific type of movement disorder. And Robert seemed to present like that. So we did a lot of work with him, but he ultimately decided that Robert didn't fit that profile and then helped us find another neurologist. So along the way, we investigated mitochondrial diseases. We did genetic testing that discovered um, uh, basal striatal. I can't quite remember the name of it, like a striatal necrosis in the brain, which can be caused by all kinds of different genetic variants. Robert tested negative for all of them. And, we just rolled along with this. And I think that we were fortunate in that none of the people that we worked with, none of the neurologists and the geneticists that we worked with ever insisted that they absolutely knew what Robert had.
So,
Because
what?
that
Oh,
that then was incredibly helpful because we didn't go down any roads where Robert could have received treatments that might have been dangerous to him. Everyone was willing to be humbled by how complex medicine is. And these, I think, are the best kinds of doctors who are humbled by their practice and are willing to tell patients, I can tell you a lot about this. I can tell you what I know and what I don't know. But in the end, I'm not sure. Let's just hang tight. Let's keep moving forward. We'll come up with more tests as we find them, and we'll keep investigating. And I think we are extremely fortunate during all of this time that those were the types of neurologists and geneticists that we encountered. And I am really, really grateful for that.
so DYTPRKRA sounds like is an unusual name that because it sounds more like a genetic code. Now, what does it mean?
Okay, so DYT simply stands for dystonia. It's the medical abbreviation for dystonia. And that is Robert's primary condition. So people talk about movement disorders in terms of spasticity or rigidity or dystonic features. So when someone has dystonia, their flexor and extensor muscles will lock up at the same time. So whenever you try to do something, you're kind of stopped in your tracks. Um, and then there's a hyphen with that. And then PRKRA that's the gene that's affected. So while Robert's illness was in 2012 initially categorized in the scientific literature as dystonia 16 or DYT 16, because they were simply numbering the dystonias as they discovered them by either specific genes or clinical symptom clusters. This has all now been reclassified as a form of Dystonia-Parkinsonism. So you can have Parkinsonian features, but not have Parkinson's disease, which is a specific diagnosis that is diagnosed with, I think, certain genetic indicators and also brain scans that reveal demyelination. And Robert doesn't have demyelination in his brain. So the symptoms that he has are, dystonia creates a form of Parkinson's disease because your body wills you to do a certain movement, to move your arm or your leg or your head a certain way. And then your dystonia basically like locks everything up so you can't do it. So you can't repeat things very easily. You might have what's called bradykinesia sometimes, which are really slow movements, and other things. I'd have to go back to Oliver Sacks' book Awakenings to remind myself of all the different characteristics of Parkinsonism.
So, okay, DYTPRKRA is associated with dystonia and Parkinsonianism. When people hear Parkinsonianism, that they're probably going to think of Parkinson's disease. Can you identify any of the different, like what's similar, what's the same and what's similar, what's different?
Well, as I said, from my memory of talking about this long ago with doctors, Parkinson's disease is itself, it's a rich field of study. I think there might be genetic markers for it. It can also be caused by environmental stressors. It causes certain patterns of demyelination in the brain, and it has its own specific progression. One of the things that I've learned about Parkinson's disease is that most people associate it with tremor, but tremor is not an essential part of Parkinson's disease. You can have Parkinson's disease and never have shaking or tremor. So Parkinsonism is when you have symptoms that are like Parkinson's disease, but you don't have Parkinson's disease itself. So the scientific community is looking at the way in which the same motor problems are driven by different diseases and disorders.
So, and in Rob's case, the damage, to his brain, is in the basal ganglia, which is the same place that it primarily is in Parkinson's, and is also affects dopamine.
Mm-hmm.
So the first medicine that Rob was put on that had an effect, and he's still on, is Cinemet, which is a medicine that provides you with dopamine and is also the main, I believe, the primary medicine that they've been giving people for Parkinson's for decades.
Yes, although research has also found that levodopa-carbidopa, which is what, or carbidopa-levodopa, either one, which is the generic name for the brand name Cinemet, can also assist or help with a variety of movement disorders. So it's a really versatile drug.
It sounds almost like cinnamon.
Yeah.
Is there cinnamon in it?
No.
Say, because they do use it.
It comes in if you can take it by mouth. I mean, the early iterations of it were Cinemet 10-100. So it's got, I think, I'll get this mixed up, but like 10 milligrams of carbidopa or levodopa per 100 milligrams of carbidopa. I think carbidopa is the buffering agent. And then there are yellow pills, 25, 100. And they've moved on to making release, 24-hour release tablets. They have jejunal pumps that people can use because Cinemet is activated much more readily in the jejunum. It has to actually bypass the stomach acid in order to have an effect. And then most recently, and this is the intervention that's helped Robert the most, is there's a company called AbbVie that has manufactured a subcutaneous pump for carbidopa levodopa. So that medication, their brand name is Vyalev, and it's a highly concentrated liquid form of carbidopa levodopa. And much like an sub-Q insulin pump, you put on a cannula with a needle that sticks into, in Robert's case, on his abdomen. I think with people who have diabetes, for example, they stick it on their upper arms, and then you have a pump attached to that delivers the medication directly to your skin, and it gets into your bloodstream much faster. And you can also, as opposed to taking a pill, where the pill enters it gets into your digestive system and metabolizes, and you have a metabolic peak and then a metabolic fall off. When you use a subcutaneous pump, you're able to maintain a steady level of the medication at all times. And that has tremendously helped Robert to be able to do a lot of things people take for granted, like move his arms around, move his head from side to side. And we're even experimenting now with what they call a speaking valve in speech therapy, which can attach to his trach and allow him to make speech sounds. And we just discovered that was possible with Robert. And so we're hoping soon to follow up with a speech language pathologist who can help us decide whether Robert can use that safely or not. And that might give Robert an ability to make some speech sounds to indicate yes or no, or other things that Robert would like to say. So
Angela, could you show the people at home that they've been looking at the pump the whole time?
Oh, yes. It is right here. There's a little screen here, very high tech. And then there is a tube, a very small tube. It's like probably the diameter, a little less than, say, the inkwell of a Bic pen, right? Mm-hmm. And then, like Geneva was explaining, there's a cannula that attaches to his belly, much like an insulin gauge or something like that. But it stays right here. Stays right there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's Robert's ride or die.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Do you like the Vyalev pump? Do you like the Cinemet pump?
That's right.
Yeah. Much better than the ups and downs of having the medication in one bolus shot.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Rob's
a little freedom. Does it make it easier for you to use the eye gazer? I would say that it does. Rob had periods, like Geneva explained, where he would have the medicine would be administered, and then he would have a period where he was very sleepy, hard for him to hold his eyes open, and then once he came out of it, it was like, oh, Rob's back. But you could tell there were certain times, especially if we were in some sort of activity that Rob enjoys, it was like, I missed out a little bit, but now he doesn't have to.
It's called his Cinemet brain.
And
Rob remembers it, yes.
And as we discovered by talking to neurologists, that is a That is a term I guess other Parkinson's patients have used for oral Cinemet brain.
Yeah. So, Rob, what's it like to communicate with your eye gaze?
Love being able to use my eye gazer to not only talk but to make art and music. To use the eye gazer, I need to concentrate very hard. It's hard work to hold my eyes on one exact spot to click a button, but it's worth it. It has gotten easier as the technology has gotten better over the years. I love using the eye gazer to make presentations of my art and advocacy. I've used it to testify about caregiving and rare diseases in front of legislative hearings in Annapolis. As a dinner speaker, I made everyone laugh when I said I want to run my own life because I'm a grown-ass man.
So, Roger, what does working with Rob's eye gaze involve?
Um, well, it's been almost almost a 20-year odyssey. Rob got the first eye gaze device back in 2007. We found out about it. Actually, it was a company that was developing the technology for the Department of Defense, and so we trialed an early version, and we had told Rob that if he did a good job, we would get one for him. And then when we came back, Rob seemed very out of sorts and upset about something. Um, and then we realized that he had expected, because he had done a really good job. He had zipped around and activated the cells, and even there was like a light that he could turn on and off in the room. Um, so he thought, since he'd done a good job, that we'd have one for him. But of course, it was then a 9-month process of getting it through insurance. I think it was like, 25,000. Um, and it wasn't at that point really practical. I mean, it took up, like about half of the kitchen table, and if you looked away, it took about 15 minutes to get it recalibrated and reset up. And then about I don't know, five or so years later, it got to the point where it was down to the size of a suitcase, that could fit on his wheelchair, that he could, take with him to school and start using it a bit in school. That was also a fight just to um, get them to actually really work with it. Finally, it got down to the point where it was a tablet with just a little like bar with the cameras, that clipped on the bottom, and that had gotten down to like $1,000 for the for a tablet off the shelf, then like 1,400 for the bar, um, and now it's back to being a solid state, all in one device. And because in the meantime, the earlier version at 14,000 is what got approved by insurance. Now you know now of course it's back up to 14,000. Um, and what had gotten it down to being so small and compact, was actually gamers started using it, so they could actually move around within the games. And I tell Rob that that's two of the three drivers of technology, Department of Defense and gamers. So as soon as they figure out a way to use it in porn, they'll perfect it. But it's it's been a process of like anything with technology. Every few years, um, it gets it gets that much better. Um, and as Rob said, I mean, it is still not there yet in that it is still difficult to use. It still takes takes a good deal of concentration. Um, it's gotten a lot better, but it still is work to get the device exactly and properly positioned, uh, what they call calibrated. Um, some we can have whenever you want, we can have Angela sort of demonstrate how that actually looks on the device. It actually can show you where his eyes are positioned and how it's picking them up. It's been some ways particularly difficult with Rob's particular condition because um, that and the medicines he takes means that his eyes are always dilated and uneven. That can make it a little difficult to pick up his eyes. We also have had to be careful when we got his glasses because some of the common UV and other coatings that people would um, get on your glasses uh, will defeat the eye gazer. Um, it was also, frankly, Rob not being, verbal. It was a number of years before we realized that Rob, in fact, needed glasses. And yeah, Rob's smiling. But when we discovered that, that in turn was a big leap in his ability um, to use the eye gazer. On the other hand, it has really opened up his world, both in expression, in you know not only in speaking but in doing his art. Um, working on music. He even composes music. Socially, and really getting people to take Rob, take Rob seriously.
So how can Rob's system be customized specifically for Rob?
Well, there's a number of different software programs. There's the one he uses for art a lot, which is a thing called jacksonpollock.org. Um, he has a number of music programs. And then there are various of the different voice output programs we've used used over the years. Some which string together sentences, others which sort of depend more on more on symbols. We're still trying to find the one or ones that sort of best use the different structures of language to make it easiest for him to quickly express what he wants to say.
So
And
Geneva mentioned that. I thought you were.
Just to
Uh,
add to what Roger
uh,
said, a great
yeah.
many a great many of the programs that are free to use that Rob can download onto the eye gazing device are highly customizable. So
Hmm.
quite a few of the programs that Rob uses there are templates and there are obviously pictures and diagrams that correspond with different words that Rob has known for, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Roger, since he was quite young.
Yes.
Images that one would use on a pegboard, things like that, that translate to the eye gazer, and then you can customize them based on what Rob wants to say. So if the language isn't sophisticated enough, or there aren't as many colloquialisms added, then we can add those in for Rob so that he has access to them.
Yeah. Yes, that's another no, it's another point is you can we can add any words we like or Rob wants, um, as well as Rob can there's a number of different voices that Rob can choose. At one point, he decided to sound like Venom, um, uh, and it also has a number of things that you can choose within it, um, like how long he has to stay on a particular spot to activate it. Um, you know, so so it's easy for him on one hand, so short is, the shorter the easier it is, but you don't want it to tip into, just activating random words as he's um, zipping around the screen. Would you like us to show you some of that?
Sure.
So just so that I'm clear, I'm showing the settings area where
Well, I guess, show a little bit of maybe some of the programs, and then maybe some of the, how we're able to, get it set up properly for him.
Okay, let's bring this around here. I'm going to move the camera real quick just so that we can. Okay. Can you see that okay, Joanna?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So there is a main menu here, and all of these cells would be a different program that Rob can use. For example, I'm just going to help Rob here for a second. Here's the Jackson Pollock program where he can use his eyes to create Jackson Pollock-like paintings.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are some other ones that are communication-based. I'll just show you a couple of them. This one is called Symbol Talker.
Mm-hmm.
So there are different pictures and diagrams for different things, but Rob can drill down into these different areas, and some of them will give him very, very detailed information that he can pick from. Say he wants to change his shirt or change his clothes or his underwear or something like that. He can access all of those things, within the clothing area of this one program. And then, hold on, buddy. Okay, I'm going to take us back. And then he has, let's see, there are obviously games that Rob can play on here. He can access YouTube. He can access MS Paint. He can access, and then we can make, like we said, we can customize. Rob is a huge Star Wars fan. So sometimes we customize pages for him.
Baby Yoda.
Just so he can he can have fun. Because sometimes it's not always about, direct communication. Sometimes it's about fun, right? Mm-hmm. You just said yes. Sorry, buddy. And then if you want, we can look at, sorry, let me go back in here. Rob and I are both doing this at the same time, so the computer is really really going to get cranky with us. Okay, so here's a little bit of an idea of what the calibration and the positioning guide looks like. Right now, Rob is not quite in alignment, so you can see that this little face here, it's only showing one eyeball and it's flashing red. If it were green and both eyes were showing, then we would know that we have it calibrated properly. Rob is having a little bit of an issue with his headrest right now. So right now we can see this is an actual picture from the cameras down here. There are lights. There are 3 different cameras. 1, 2, 3. 1 in the middle, 2 on the sides here. And these beam into Rob's brain. Just kidding. These are the cameras that pick up Rob's eye movement and the motion in his eyes and his pupils. So right now I'm looking at it and I can see one of his pupils on the screen here has a red X in it and one of them has a green X. So I can tell by looking at that it's only picking up one of his eyes, which doesn't mean that it won't work. It just means that it's not optimized.
Mm-hmm.
Did I cover everything that you wanted to see? Do you want to see more? Wait.
Sure.
Yeah. Do you want to show her more? Do you want to show her?
Oh, the music's cool.
Can I tell you something about me?
Sure. Go ahead.
Do you want to tell her about your family, your friends? Things you like, things you don't like?
Negatory.
Any one of those will work, buddy. I hope.
Can I tell you something about me?
Yes.
I am an artist, and I have my own art website.
Oh. So what's the website?
I also sell my art products at I am an artist, and I have my own art website. I also sell my art products at conventions, meetings, and craft fairs.
So, how do you know when Rob wants you to add something to the program, to the eye gazer? How does he let you know that?
I would say that it's ever evolving. So there are times when, say, in instances like this, where we know that Rob has a podcast or Rob has a presentation that he needs to give, then we know that there are things that we need to add and grids that we need to add to accommodate for him to be able to speak the things that he wants to say. And then typically we work with him cell by cell on how he wants to communicate the things that he needs to communicate, and then we program them into the eye gazer.
Saying Rob has grip switches in each hand that are connected to it's called a step by step, but it's a little voice output. It's actually, you can see it's the thing with the with the green button on his wheelchair. That green is the yes side. So one side is yes, one side is no. Although, since just saying yes and no is boring, we've made it more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So we would take him through, Rob, do you want us to add something? He'd say yes, and then, give him various options. That also works for when he's king of TV, figuring out what shows he wants to watch, or it's how also he tells us when something hurts and we need to correct something, or look at something medically with him.
What do you wish developers of the eye gaze systems understood about the perspective of families using them?
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess, I mean, how key ease of use is, and particularly portability. I mean, you can you can see how how bulky it is. Um, I mean, it is, not practical to have up, moving around in any kind of a crowd or anything. Um, we can, I mean, Rob does use it out in public. He's used it to, you know, ad- address groups with his advocacy. Um, he has friend groups, that meet in restaurants and such, where, we set it up. It is difficult. I mean, it's difficult to move a wheelchair between restaurant tables as is, but that's that much more difficult. Um, but just the sheer size and delicacy of it. We it's if you drop and break it, it's an expensive, you know would be an expensive thing to fix. Um, and then, I mean, increasing the availability of programs. Um, be great to have a lot more games, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, Angela, Geneva. I don't know if Geneva's on yet. What?
I would say portability would be one of the main one of my if I were to have my druthers, I would like it to be more portable for Rob. It is the type of device and houses the type of programs where you do better the more exposure you have to them. And the more hours a day you can have the eye gazer up in front of you, the better. But it is difficult, like Roger said, to travel with it or to be in transit with it. So it needs to be carried with. And then once we arrive at our destination, the eye gazer goes up, and then mobility is limited at that point. Once the eye gazer is mounted onto the housing that he has on his chair, because it does stick out a little bit farther. It increases Rob's footprint, if you will, and has an arm that comes out. Let me see if I can show you, Joanna. It has an arm that comes out a certain amount of degrees from the chair. And it is not a light device. It is quite heavy.
It doesn't look like it's very light.
It's not, but it is secure. It's just I wouldn't feel comfortable. Say if we were going out somewhere on like a city street, I would never feel comfortable having the eye gazer up on the pole for Rob because the amount of like bumps and uneven pavement and things like that, it would just knock it off of its base. And like Roger said, that's a very expensive mistake to make.
Yeah. Have you ever had to fix it?
I have accidentally, one time when we were out, there's a way that you can put the eye gazer up in a position like this, so that one of the chief complaints of folks who I've met who are able to communicate verbally is that the machine is right in front of Rob's face. It has to be in order to track his eyes, but it also puts a barrier between Rob and the rest of the world. So occasionally you would want to tip the machine up so that Rob can see directly ahead of him. But there was one time I did that, and the pole flapped on the other side, and it was quite frightening. It didn't fall to the ground, but it was frightening for me because I certainly didn't want to ruin the device that helps Rob communicate.
Yeah.
We could just ask Rob. Rob, was it difficult to learn how to use the eye gazer?
That's right.
Do you feel like you have a better idea of how to use it now? Do you feel like an expert now? That was one of his yes
Yeah.
to infinity and beyond. He's a huge Buzz Lightyear fan, so yes, to infinity and beyond is an affirmative. So
Yes.
yeah. So you feel like you're more of an expert now than you were when you first started? Do you feel like you still have a ways to go? Do you feel like you still could learn? Still have things to learn? His arm is moving, but the yes is not activating, but he is saying yes.
Yeah. This is kind of like a learn to use a cell phone almost.
Somewhat. Somewhat. I have also noticed that, yes, Rob is very good at poking around in the different cells to see what they are. But I have noticed that when they're static and we leave them, it's easier for him to learn where they are as opposed to like changing them frequently. Like,
Yeah.
does that make sense? Like, it's
Yeah.
sort of like if you have a number grid in front of you, you know where the one is, right? But if someone moves
Yeah.
that one, then it's a little confusing because you're used to going to the one where the one is. So
Yeah. Rob, we're seeing this from the caregiver's we're seeing this from the caregiver's perspective. What is it like for you, from your perspective, to be the person in the lift?
Damn straight.
When I am using my lift, I feel like I am flying. It feels safer in the mechanized lift than when I'm in a manual lift or people are moving me without any lift at all.
we like to joke with those of us who work with Rob when he's using the lift. We like to joke with him that, well, I always ask him if he's ready to fly, and I call him Flyboy because that's what they call one of the pilots in Star Wars.
As my father would say, very carefully was always his answer to everything. It takes a great deal of agility. Medicaid home services are an important part of that balance because they allow us to hire nurses, or Rob to hire nurses, and Rob to hire staff who are not family, such as Angela, for example, and also Rands. And, outside those parameters, it's complicated because Rob is 29 years old. Rob wants to have his own life. Once you get into the world of rare disease and medical complexity, most states, including Maryland, make it really, really difficult for parents and their adult disabled children to have a healthy separation. There is an extraordinary amount of gratuitous care that is either required or foisted upon you, and there aren't a lot of guardrails that protect parents or participants. It's just one of the major flaws of our Medicaid home system. And I can only hope that as time moves forward politically, that Congress will correct the Medicaid statute and make Medicaid home and community services mandatory for all people with disabilities.
Okay, so again, this is another one for you guys. What parts of caregiving do people outside of your home rarely see?
All of it. Um, well, and I mean, frankly, a lot of it they don't see because it is so socially isolating. Um, you know, they don't see us. They don't see it because they don't see us. I mean, in part because they live in homes that aren't accessible, um, or invitations over the years tail off because they feel like they don't have stuff in common with us. I don't know. I'm sure, Geneva, you have a lot to add on that.
Yeah, I would emphasize that as you go along in time, especially as your child moves out of the school system, um, the people that you have been friends with and may even continue to be friends with stop seeing you. They still see you empathetically and sympathetically, and we still have conversations with them, and I still see them from time to time. But they largely see that disability and rare healthcare needs are simply some other world on some other planet that they don't inhabit and they don't plan on inhabiting. And I say this with the greatest of love for our friends. People just it's the last acceptable form of othering that we have in our society. I mean, yes, there's still plenty of racial and ethnic discrimination. There are discriminations, there's LGBTQ discrimination, but at least people tend to call that out more often than they do disability discrimination. And disability discrimination affects primarily people with disabilities, obviously, but also their families. And I think that it would be nice if people who, for example, are not disabled would perhaps spend some time watching films like Crip Camp or The Road Ahead or any other number of films about people with disabilities that are joyful, and start to understand the context of what it means to live a disabled life and realize that, hey, maybe there's a way that we can we can structure friendships. Maybe the fact that one day I may be old and or disabled, or my parents might become disabled, would be a reason for us to strike up a friendship so that I would know what to do in that case. But it's the way life is.
Mm-hmm. So this is Rob. What does independence mean to you?
I gauge my independence by how I feel, not how others define it. It means I can make decisions about where I go and with whom I spend my time. Sometimes people ignore me because I can't talk. People talk to my parents about me even though I am right there. People assume that because I'm non-speaking that I am hard of hearing, so they speak loudly and slowly to me, which is funny because I have super hearing and can always hear when anyone is talking about me in another room.
Yeah, and I
Yes.
vouch for that because we've had to whisper sometimes to keep holiday secrets and other things away from Rob, like in another room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He can and will fill in the blanks.
Has Rob
You
changed
cut out.
the Okay. Has Rob changed the way that the two of you think about independence? What independence means?
Yes.
How?
Um, oh, no, feeling overwhelmed. Geneva?
Sure. So I think that from a disability rights context, that independence isn't an absolute form of freedom. It is the freedom that you achieve using the supports that are available to you. And you want to have supports that are high enough to meet your needs, to be independent in the ways that are important to you. So, for example, I think that for Rob, although I hesitate to speak for Rob because Rob has already given me the stink eye again, see this. For Rob, that means being able to do things without his parents, being able to go to the movies, being able to see his friends, being able to go to classes, being able to advocate. You know, for me, it means Rob having a level of Medicaid home supports that allow me to do projects and work that are meaningful to me. And that it's always going to be a struggle for the parents of people who have really complex disabilities and complex medical needs, because the state, you just have to look at this through the social model of disability, that it isn't the person, it's the systems in their way and the barriers in their way. And in our case, at the moment, we're undergoing a profound period where the state of Maryland is simply unwilling to let any of us have the independence that we need in any meaningful way. And it is a process that is gradually, frankly, breaking my heart, because as Robert's mother, I I feel morally compelled to make sacrifices in my own life to ensure that Robert has independence, even if it costs me my own independence. Yet at the same time, I feel perfectly justified in being deeply resentful of the state of Maryland for blocking my ability to be a person in my own right.
See, Rob, when did you become interested in advocacy?
That's right.
During the fight over Obamacare, I saw protesters in wheelchairs in the Capitol arrested. Around the same time, in response to the Charlottesville Unite the Right rally, I went with my dad and some of our neighbors to Wisconsin Avenue and held up a sign that said, "Honk for love." That so many people responded, honked and waved, made me feel like I had a voice and that people would respond to me.
Roger, what has it been like watching Rob develop from someone who wanted to protest into an experienced advocate?
Well, I guess as somebody who's been in that you know that world for decades. I mean, it's been kind of a kind of amazing, the profile and impact Rob's had. I mean, you know um, Jamie Raskin and the governor of Maryland, and all his legislators all you know know him by name, and Nancy Pelosi comes over and says hello when she sees him, and you know um you have it's hard to hard to see it in the way in the back, Rob's wall of fame with pictures with him with all of those um all of those folks, um and he you know sort of really has, even without you know speaking, has really has a presence that's commanded attention.
True. Let's see, Geneva and Roger, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you think families or healthcare professionals need to hear?
Well, I mean, I would add, I mean, since the diagnosis, and because Rob's Rob's condition is so unique. He still, as far as we know, is the only confirmed case in North America. Um, so, he, and he's very proud of this, and he was very eager to do this, has actually donated some of his cells for research. And we've been in touch with some of the researchers who are actually working on Rob's cell lines. One of them down in who's working, Dr. Patel, and she has a lab down at the University of South Carolina. And she found that luteolin actually, at least in the test tube, prevents the gene from doing further damage.
Yeah, I can shed a little more specific light on that. So, so Dr. Patel's lab has been the center of a lot of study of the body's integrated stress response, because the gene PRKRA controls the integrated stress response. And the integrated stress response is activated when somebody has a viral infection, a bacterial infection, experiences environmental stress, even emotional stress, physical stress. And what it does is it helps the body do a controlled cell apoptosis, cell death, in order to get rid of the cells that are infected or damaged. But in people who have variants to the gene PRKRA, especially if they are paired, as Rob's are, this is a heterozygous pairing, but pairing of issues nonetheless, then the ISR actually becomes hyperactive and very difficult to shut down or calm down. You don't want to shut it off altogether, because then you wouldn't be able to fight off infection at all. But Dr. Patel's lab has discovered that high doses of the flavonoid, it's an over-the-counter supplement. Flavonoid is it's not a vitamin, but it's another compound, nutritional compound that's found in plants, especially things like broccoli and parsley. And high doses of that can help to calm down the ISR and bring it under control. And so we've been giving, with the supervision of Robert's neurologist, we've been giving Robert high doses of luteolin now for, I think it's been at least 3 years. And we all feel that it has stabilized his condition, and the condition is not progressing any further. So, yay science, go research,
Yeah.
go NIH.
Yeah. So you guys did all this without even a nonprofit behind you, because I looked and didn't even see a nonprofit. Couldn't even find a Facebook group on it. So
No, there isn't one, and really we owe a great debt to C. Jamie Lin, who was the man who started. He's a doctor, and he's got some very fancy PhD in some very fancy form of like neurobiology. He was the one who started Rare Genomics. And I used to be a mom blogger, back in the heyday of that in the mid 2000s. And so interacted with a bunch of other people in the undiagnosed community. And, one day received an email from a blogger friend who said, "Hey, I've got this friend and he's starting this nonprofit and he's really smart. He knows what he's doing. And they're looking for pilot cases." And Roger and I were like, yeah, we got one last like diagnostic quest in us, like one last trip down this road. And so we were like, yeah, we'll do it. We'll sign on, and yeah, without Rare Genomics and without their help, Rare Genomics also after we had the diagnosis, connected us with the researchers who were working on Dystonia 16. And that's how we got in touch with Dr. Patel. And that's how we got connected to the Dystonia Medical Research Foundation. That's why we made a trip to Boston so our entire family could give skin samples and blood samples to their database. And that's how the research on Rob's cells began.
Hmm.
So, yeah, there's no Facebook group. There's no foundation behind us, but there are the efforts of Jimmy and Rare Genomics, and we just owe a huge debt of thanks to them.
Have you
Yeah,
ever,
actually, Joanna, this is the Facebook group.
have you guys ever thought about starting a Facebook group?
No, because now I'm so involved, and Robert's so
Yeah.
involved in disability advocacy. We're in so many
Yeah.
Facebook groups, and we are. It's such a rare disorder. I think there are really no more than 50 cases that have been reported in the world,
Mhm.
and all of them are different because the gene defect that I carry that's common to every single case is so rare. You basically have to marry someone you're related to in order to have a homozygous recessive case of it.
Yeah.
So what kicked off all the research was this cluster of homozygous cases in Brazil where there was a consanguineous family and people were marrying their cousins. Um, but if you look at all the other cases worldwide, you see that all of them carry this one defect that I have, and then the other defect is on a different position on PRKRA, and most of the time it's de novo, and all of them are different.
Hmm.
So it's hard to have a group or a foundation simply because the expression of DUIT PRKRA is so different in every single case. So the best that we can do is stay in touch with the research groups and see what they've got going on. And then, of course, if we ever happen to come across somebody who has this condition, well, yeah, of course, we'll connect and correspond with them. You know, no
Hmm.
worries, and connect them with everybody that we know that could help.
Yeah. So, let's see, Rob, Roger, Geneva, and Angela, thank you so much for joining me today on Rare Connection and for sharing your family's perspectives on communication, caregiving, independence, and advocacy. And Rob, thank you for sharing your voice and helping us better understand what communication and independence can look like for someone who uses who uses eye gaze technology. Um, so
Thank you for
let's
having me
see.
on your podcast and listening to my perspective.
My guest will be Dr. Elliot Segal, a pioneer radiologist, medical informatics leader whose work helped move radiology from film into the digital era. We'll discuss how medical imaging and our artificial intelligence and data-driven medicine are helping make cancer care more precise and explore the growing field of theranostics. Um, the episode will be recorded on August 25th. Until next time, thank you for watching and listening to Rare Connection, and where we connect rare disease community through education, advocacy, and shared experiences.